Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, KIMATHI, as always, and this is the Exchange Podcast. We've been dying to have this conversation, and today in studio we have not only a close friend and an ally in comradeship, but also a name around we might be knowing. So I'll let him introduce himself, and then we shall kickstart. Karibu sana, Kiki.
Asante sana. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kelvin Kimani, of course, famously known as KK. I am the campus representative at Parklands campus and also a close friend to Kimathi here. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Sante, I thought you'd mention that Parklands campus is a hub of lawyers. It's the Kenyatta University School of Law.
Of course.
So we will start. And I think before we start, we need to look back and reflect that where are we as a comradeship of the Republic of Kenya compared to the former glory that we had with the likes of Akina Babu Owino, or even way back with James Orengo and the likes who are now staging all the lights in the political realm. What do you think compared to those two? Are we better off, or where do we sit?
I think we can look it in different facets. For instance, I think the current comradeship, we are facing different set of challenges, different from the previous, people who are there. And our set of challenges coming from, from the likes of Kina Orengo, Babu Owino. During their time, it was an issue to do with fighting for the governance of the country or for good governance for the country. But then currently, now as us, the new comrade, we are facing, issues to do with our funding as comrades in the university, and that is threatening our stay in the university at the first place. And also now you see again, as comrades, we also have the issue to do, of course, with the good governance of the country. And so bringing a balance between the two, I believe that I don't think we are really doing well. And I think also, student leadership itself, because it's the voice of comrades, has been reduced to just mere,
Positions.
yeah, and rubber stamps for the university administration, in the sense that since the coming into force after the Duale bill,
Yes.
the amendment on the Universities Act, then you find that it's more of just rubber stamp.
Wametuka bako.
Tumekabwa. Si kama mapema when people would really voice out their issues.
I think the way you've mentioned it, that back then it was governance and human rights. Right now, it's not only governance and human rights. It's not that we are saying they achieved it. We are still fighting for that. But then, wametuguza pabaya. How do you expect us to fight for human rights na funding bado haijatoka?
True.
Looking into that perspective, the comrades have been suffering with the funding for so long. From the new funding model that was outlawed by the courts, of course, to the disbandment. Now nasikia imetoka, wengine hawajapata. What do you think as a comrade in charge hapo Kusol? What do you think?
I think first of all, the NFM, the new funding model, is like a monster that you don't understand. Even as a student leader, sometimes you find it hard to be able to dissect what really the new funding model is all about. Despite that, the government will say it's equality, equity, or whatever. But the issue is, comrades are really suffering. For instance, I have been told that my first year and second year comrades should just register their units as they wait for the government to release the funding, so that after the funding has come, now they can be able to be allocated their batch ya the household fee yenye mzazi anafaa kulipa. And so you see there is a lot of confusion.
At that point, ni kama haiko karibu kukuja.
Ni kama hata hujui kama inakuja ama haikuji. Wewe unakaa tu ugoje tu uone venye kutaenda.
Na pia umesema the challenges we are facing are not the ones that were faced back then. It reminds me of the starting of the world's most popular speech by Martin Luther King Jr. It says that he had a dream that one day the sons of slaves and sons of slave owners will sit at a table and agree. To his mind, he thought that once the government outlaws the segregation due to color or whatever, or slavery or anything of the sort, that we would live in a very peaceful world. True. But what he didn't know, there will be terms like neo-colonialism, state capture, international interest, and all that stuff. And comparing that to whatever we are going through right now, not only as comrades, is that our challenges are now diverse. No one thought that it would come a time that comrades were not speaking for for the state's sake in terms of governance, participation, lakini sasa ni their stake, their right.
Actually, we are fighting for our own self, the survival.
Ni kama wametuzoea na unajua nitapiga mtu kofi hapa saizi na ni nyinyi mliniita hapa. Anyway, I want us also to look at the fact that at the end of last year had a lot of hope that was mixed up with a lot of chaos, which was a blessing in disguise. That we thought that the comrades were coming up, that the youthful republic was beginning to rise, because statistically, from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, is that higher than 55% of the current country's population is a youth between 18 to 35. And even more, the population increases as we go down the grade age, 18, 17. So as time goes by, we can only expect our country to youngen in age. So we let us just look from around the 20th of November last year. We had riots and everything, and the likes of heroic lives were lost, Rex Masai and others. And we thought that we were heading to a country where tribal lines will not be political heads, because what does a low young man have to do with Murima Imeguzwa? It's not that it's a bad thing,
Yeah, true.
but it's like sasa ikifika hapo nyinyi kwanza mtulie. So I think, what do you think about it? Because many people are opining that it is dividing the nation, because we have people from Coast, we have people from Nyanza, we have people from Rift Valley. We thought that we had finished that. We had come to an era of people who are tribeless and nameless. What happened? Ukiulizwa nini ilitokea hapo katikati between December, January, what happened?
The fact is, there is the Gen Zs, as we always call ourselves. We had decided to start a revolution, and this revolution, had so many glares of hope. But then I think we look dating back from our history, then Kenyan politics has always been, tribal politics. And you understand that the the current game players of politics are still people who were doing politics, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And so their game plan is still tribal. And I think as youths, despite that we want to start a revolution, we have not yet overcome, the situation with being led by certain tribal chiefs. And for instance, I don't want to mention names, but you can tell, people are like, you call them tribal bigots, because these people just want to ride on the narrative that, we ni mtu wangu, we ni mtu wetu, so that they gain political office. But then at the end of the day, us as youths, we have not been able to overcome, that state of being led by such people. And I think probably the change can only be seen when one day it's the Gen Zs who are, leading this country. If you look at the people you would say that are in leadership and Gen Zs, you see we have a CS, yes, one CS Monga, but then you see yet in the whole cabinet ministers, kumina ni yeye tu peke yake. So you can tell, the people who are there, name them, Musalia Mudavadi, Hassan Joho. These are the same names since I don't know 2000
over and over.
Yes,
the monkeys are the same. Misitu inabadilika, nyani ni wale. In your opinion, what do you think will change the situation? Because we thought it had changed. I also thought it had changed. What do you think will take more? Because apparently, what the current situation is telling us, it will take more than that.
True.
It will take more than getting out of streets. It will take more than tweeting. It will definitely take more than losing lives. What do you think will change the political setup of our country?
I think one is the fact that we have to understand that change cannot come overnight. There is no change that will come overnight. And so the change can only be achieved, over time. And I think we are on the right trajectory so far. I would say probably it is, the change starts with you and I, from the sense that, as we are enlightened, in the sense that we understand more about governance and, leadership, then we come to the issue of civic education. And you see somebody like Kebaso, he's trying really to educate people, to give people that civic education. And I think slowly by slowly, if people can can be able to learn more about leadership and governance, then I believe we will get there one day. One day we will get there. But kwa sahi,
Kwa
I
sasa,
think, and you can look at it from the political sense, useme, the current leaders, as I have said, are people who led this country 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So their mindset is not the same as ours. But in the next 10, 15, 20 years, probably we'll have a new set of leaders, and probably with a new set of leaders, then new ideologies, new mindset. And that way, I believe that the change will come slowly by slowly.
we might be starting at the periphery. Now the old ones are still there, but
Yes,
the new ones are coming
exactly.
in. But we are still moving in the right direction. With regards to moving to the right direction, we've seen a number of appointments that are targeting the youth. Top of the list would be Monga Mureithi, the CS for water. But we also have the Department for Youth Affairs with the Ministry for Youth Affairs. What would be your comment on that? Because from the previous regime, we've seen heads of such departments not being necessarily youth, 60 plus, 55. What do you think? Because, and looking at the fact that that challenge is not only in Kenya, it is a global challenge. You look at even economic giants like South Africa, and people who are put in charge of the youth affairs and are not necessarily youth. I mean, there could be some wisdom to that the blind cannot lead the blind, but there is that ideology, sorry to say, or rather a fabric of thoughts that is not necessarily correct, that the youth are not capable of leading themselves, guiding themselves, having enough ideas. What do you think might change that? Because we might have friction when we have the lead of a youth department not being youth.
And it's so ironical when you say that you want to lead the youth, yet yourself you do not subscribe to the ideology of the youth that you are leading.
It certainly beat logic.
It certainly does.
Wanaharibu kabisa, wanamuita huyu ni kijana na unaona kabisa ako na chwani amepita, wanasema huyu ni kijana,
ni mzee. Lakini unajua kuna wengine wanasema hao ni wazee vijana.
Wazee vijana. Do you think it is smart?
It isn't at all. At all. It isn't. And what I will say is, one, the appointments that have been done with having people like CS Mungai in the government, it's progressive, yes, but that isn't it. Like, that's just one out of many. And I think, for instance, the Department on Youth Affairs, then that department should be filled with so many youths leading the country. And I believe that the youth of our country is quite sharp, and so we have intelligent people who can be able to take up these leadership positions and lead the youth. So I believe it's not wise at all to have old men claiming that they are leading the youth.
Why would you call it youth affairs?
Yes.
Without youths in the office.
You have
beats
wazee
logic.
affairs.
Wazee affairs.
Yes.
And as a group of special interest, how do you think the international community comes to play with the youth population, not necessarily in Kenya peke yake, but also in Africa? The fact that Africa is known for resources. I mean, they might be calling it a poor continent, a dark continent, but it is known for resources. And looking at human resource, it is also the largest in terms of numbers.
True.
How do you think that one will advantage us in the next few years? Because ni ukweli, we have numbers, we have manpower, we have traction in labor, but do you think it will advantage us? Because time and time again, we have seen exploitation in terms of resources due to inability or inadequate resources. But here, labor, do you think the numbers we have and the energy as a continent, will it advantage us, or it will be the same chorus over and over again? Watatuosha mpaka energy.
And how you can look at it is that human resource, of course, in Africa is the largest form of investment that we have. But then also you find that we tend to export, of course, more human labor, more human resource than any other kind of resource that we have. Despite that, Africa is rich with minerals, Africa is rich with a lot of resources, of course, most of which is exploited, of course, by the big giants. But I would say that, yes, we are at an advantage of having, an energized youth group, a very, very brilliant youth group. But then the issue is, do these people really reside in Africa or do they go to build elsewhere? That's the issue. And the issue is we have very brilliant minds, but instead of them building their own country, then they reside in other countries. And so you find the brilliancy that we would have enjoyed is taken elsewhere. And so they continue to develop other countries, yet ours, we remain that one as they call us. So I think that's the issue.
I think it also reminds me of a journal that was done during Mutahi Kagwe's first term as Minister of Health, that the Republic of Kenya pumps a lot of resources into education, especially for medicine students, only to find that above 50% of whatever whatever outcome we get from the medicine schools, we just leave them to abroad. That's their final destination.
True.
More than 60% of the Kenyan doctors, nurses, and other practitioners will just find their ways outside the countries, mostly targeting Europe and other places. You find that very rhetorical because one, the government is pumping that money, and most of the time that government doesn't have that money. We will most often than not borrow, i.e., borrow from the European Union or other players to finance their education, which will benefit them, and at the end of the day, the Republic will have to pay back the loan.
True.
But that doesn't sit fair. Is that personal interest or patriotism? What is not right? Because something is not right.
I think the issue is the kind of working environment that the government provides for these people, because it takes a lot to educate just to have one graduate in medicine. It takes a lot of money. But then the issue is, once they are done with their studies, do they have favorable working environment here in Kenya? And that the working environment, you can discuss it in various limbs, because it actually comes to the issue of actually how much are they paid. And if you have studied for medicine 6 years, then you are out there and you don't earn unatama kama you don't earn a substantial amount, then you are like, hii masomo yote ya miaka 6 kwani ilikuwa buri?
What for?
And it's surprising. You see, a country like Rwanda, if you do research well, you will find that a country like Rwanda has been built by Kenyans, actually. When you talk about the engineers who built Rwanda, these are Kenyans. And you can be shocked at the things that Kenyans are doing, in other foreign countries. But here in our country, then we have various issues. Talk about the working environment, talk about the issues that affect us, like corruption. And, that is all those issues are what, lead to these Kenyans living the country and looking for better places. They can make more money. They can have more favorable working environment. Yeah, and everything is, the cost of living is also probably, lower than it is here. So
there's a vocal senator, I think it's Senator for Kisii, who mentioned that it beats logic that our current expenditure totals a budget of Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Uganda put together. More than half of the Eastern Africa bloc cannot be at par with our budget. However, our teachers are striking, our doctors are striking, the government agencies are lacking funding, and it all boils down to I don't know if it's lack of patriotism or is it personal interests, because you will find the narrative that Kenyans will eat it up. I had during Miguna's campaign session, he mentioned that all those he was competing against who had previous government offices had scandals and kashfas.
Yeah.
So you will wonder, is it only in Kenya that we have stomachs to put, or is it that we are coming from a country where we do not have the narrative of patriotism? Which of the two would work? Ama it's a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two. And when you mention patriotism, what beckons in my mind is actually even the ongoing AUC elections. You see, Kenyans are against the candidature of Right Honorable Raila Odinga, yet he's a Kenyan like us. That brings the patriotic nature. And then when we talk about our budgetary allocations, we have very big, large budget. For instance, the current, the 2025 finance bill is estimated at around 4 point something trillion. And you see now we have exceeded again. We were playing at 3 trillion and something. Now we are at 4 trillion. Yet the same problems will continue to face us. There is the strikes and everything. And, you can talk about, corruption, embezzlement of funds, definitely, as we would say it. And I think Kenyans, the morality of Kenyans is an issue, because the moral standard, because if somebody anaweza iba pesa na achaguliwe governor Nairobi ama Kiambu, then what do you teach the kids? Because you have Waitito, sijui.
Yeah, that's a very prevailing issue with a scandal of 538 million, and then a fine comes up of 53.3 million. The judicial system is something that is a whole discussion about. I'll also want you to just throw a word on the current judicial system, going to the fact that you are head of a law school. And what do you think? What's the problem? Do we have a problem ama ni Wakenya wako na siasa?
Okay, it's both ways. Of course, Wakenya wanakuwa na siasa kila wakati. But pia, of course, there is a narrative that is ongoing on Juris Pesa, headed by Ahmed Nasir, and also Nelson Havi. And I believe these are senior counsels. So as they talk about Juris Pesa, they really know what they are talking about.
Lipo.
Lipo. Na kama halipo?
Linzi yani.
So at the end of the day, I believe that, there are issues with our judiciary, but then I would also hail them. For instance, the issue to do with Ferdinand Waitito, the former governor, Kiambu, I believe it's progressive because, he's amongst the very few individuals who have been brought to book by the judiciary for embezzlement of funds. That's progressive.
Baby
because
steps.
Watu wengi wamebeba hii kitu, lakini nothing is done.
Lakini wapi?
Hakuna kitu inafanyika. So at least it's progressive, but then I would say we have a lot of work. We have a lot to do.
Since we've mentioned the judiciary, we can look at the functionality of our three arms of government. Recently, there've been a ruling by the court that says a speaker cannot hold the position of speaker and party leader. And the speaker gave his rebut and said that was an opinion from the judiciary. However, hours apart from that, is that the judiciary also noted that the majority party has been the minority party for so long. Unashanga, what is not happening?
True.
Can it be sincerely, genuinely practical that the minority has been sitting as majority for the last 2+ years and vice versa? Alafu then we had Junet Mohammed sitting as majority, for a few before shifting. What does that mean to a normal person? What does majority leader, minority leader, majority party? What does that mean in your own understanding? And why do we see shifts? I mean, minorities, we know minority. Hatuwezi amka asubuhi tuseme hawa watu watano out of 50 are majority. What is happening in our legislature?
There is a contest between who are the majority and who are the minority. For any government, it's very essential to actually control the legislature, because it's the lawmaking body. And so for government to be able to, entrench its own policies, it have to have the majority in parliament.
The manifesto they promised.
Yes, they have to have the majority to have, some of the bills that they want passed. And so the government of the day definitely wants to control parliament. And that's definite. And you could see it from day one when the president was announced. He went and, akachukua wase kadhaa wa
independent wote wenye hawakuwa na
kawarusha pamoja. And now it's a big issue on the majority and the minority, because, the majority party controls also, most of the committees. They control the number of people in the committees. And for a government to have its policies running through, you need to have numbers in some of these committees. And so I think that is why the government of the day has to fight to ensure that it keeps the majority. But then there is an issue, because in as much as Azimio is fighting for the majority position, then you might wonder, because some of the principles of Azimio have already denied, or they say that they do not belong to Azimio any longer. But then they want also to be declared as, as part of the Azimio coalition for them to form the majority. So you find that we have now we have positions like, there are parties like UDM, we have parties like Maendeleo Chap Chap that exited Azimio, so they are no longer part of the Azimio
It's
coalition. So they cannot be counted as part of the Azimio coalition. So there are such issues that you have to look at. But then I think what I would address is the issue to do with the ruling by the judiciary on that issue. Then you find the Kenyan constitution establishes a very good system, checks and balances. It helps to ensure that no arm of government has absolute powers. And then you find that the judiciary now keeps in check
The legislature.
the legislature. So pale wanasema kidogo mlichanganya, but then the speaker says it's my mandate as the speaker to announce who is the majority and to decide who is the majority and who is the minority.
That also pleads the question, do procedures supersede the law? Because honestly speaking, is that should be a motion table and left to the discretion of the speaker to decide, because this is another realm. Now the judiciary, in its attempt to keep the checks and balances, is acting ultra-vires, inaingilia maneno ya watu wengine.
Yeah, watu wengine.
So that I would want to hear your comments on procedures and the law, because basically what the judiciary did is dictate what the law dictates, and what parliament stood on as its rock would be the procedures. So which is bigger, the procedure or the law itself?
At the end of the day, I believe the law supersedes procedure. That's my take. Because then we are a country of the rule of law, and so the law should always supersede procedure, any form of procedure. But then you have to look at these things in tandem with each other. Like, you have to pick them and try to connect them together, because there is a rule in here, but then you find at the end of the day the house procedures dictate that it's the speaker's obligation to state who, or to declare who is the majority party and who is the minority party.
At the end of the day, the MPs will only listen to the speaker.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, the judiciary has ruled, but then when we come into the house, then the speaker has the power to announce who is the majority, and that's why he picked it as an advisory, like
Opinion.
It's an advisory opinion from the judiciary.
You mentioned something about AUC when we were talking about patriotism, and a lot of Kenyans have different opinions, but then at the end of the day, there's this boiling question: does supporting Raila because he is a Kenyan quite too low? Because we are looking at whatever you will do, your impact, the impact that you will have. So supporting you just because I see you around, or just because I'm a Kenyan like you, doesn't really make much sense. But however, looking at the other side of the coin is that if you won't support Baba, then who will?
Yeah.
I mean, who should in the first place?
True. And I might face a lot of criticism for that, but I think Kenyans are not really patriotic, because let's face it, most of the Kenyans are supporting the Djibouti candidate, and I believe it's out of bitterness, because they think ni machungu tu ya Kasongo, because they believe that Raila is a candidate wa Kasongo, and so he's a puppet to the president. And at the end of the day, my biggest question is, what has the Djibouti candidate done for Kenyans at the end of the day? Because at least I know Baba fought for the second liberation of this country. At least I know Baba's leadership history. I don't know about the Djibouti candidate's, leadership history. I don't know about the Madagascar candidate, leadership history. So at the end of the day, it's an issue of the person I know. And we always say, better the devil you know than the angel you don't know.
You don't.
At the end of the day, I know Baba. I might have never supported Baba at any point, but the issue is, I believe he's a Kenyan like me. I know he's, what he has done for the country, and I believe he's the best fit for that position. But then, Kenyans are just merely bitter. They don't have any rationale. I doubt if there might be Kenyans who have a rational, decision on why they support the other candidate. But most Kenyans are merely bitter. Nothing else.
We just hope that he gets it, but at the end of the day, he has a losing streak, which we hope he will break. And as we also look to conclude, is that generally, not only because we've been dwelling on matters of the republic and all of that stuff, uh, where the world sits, how the world is running universally. How do you think the youth are placed? Because we have in Africa and especially in Kenya, we have that rationale or that mind that the young ones should probably pledge loyalty, respect, and honor those above them. But at the same time, there's pressure that the youth or the young ones are the ones to take up responsibilities in due course. So the balance between that has been a true menace, especially in Africa, where many leaders don't want to let go, but and outside the world, because we've seen most of the world leaders are not necessarily youth,
Yeah.
but there's a considerable number of the youth population, and there's been a push for the last 20, 30 years. The youth should be engaged in such matters, and it pleads the question, so should we give the young people these opportunities, or probably look for other avenues for them to grow with the outgoing regimes? What do you think?
My take on that is that, of course, we ought to respect and honor those above us, but at the same time, we are the upcoming generation, and we have to take part in the decision making, because every decision that is made today will influence tomorrow. And so we are the people who will be there tomorrow at the end of the day. So I believe the youth ought to take responsibility and take up especially leadership positions, and also participate, in matters governance of their country, and also ensure that they are also at the table. If you are not at the table, then you are at the menu at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So lazima ukue tu kwa
It's
moja.
either you're at the table, on the table, as many.
Exactly. Yeah. Lazima either ukue umekaa na wao ama wewe ni unadishiwa. Hakuna story ingine hapo.
Ni kweli.
So at the end of the day, I believe the youth should take up these leadership positions, and also there comes the issue of mentorship. In as much as the youth want to take up leadership positions, then they ought to have mentors, people they are accountable to, people they can be able to talk to, people who can be able to guide them. And so it's a balance between the two, and I believe there is always an issue to be able to balance those two factors. Yeah.
Kweli. Allow me through this one, even as we wind up, is that sometimes last year there's a demographic report that comes out every year that brings out the ratio of happy to sad people, nations, ranking of nations. I think that one did trend sometimes last year, that we have improved our position of happy people as a country. Wakenya wanajulikana kama watu wa happy people, utawaletea pressure, especially from the memes and all that stuff. And it is basically not necessarily our culture, but it is becoming a tradition. But recently, there's been one research conducted that Kenyans have increased the number of or have decreased in that position. It is not yet out officially, lakini it's that many Kenyans are not happy people.
They are not.
Ni watu wanakasirika, hasira iko kwa wingi sana. Even as we end the first quarter of this year, what will be your reason to why Kenyans are not necessarily happy? They are not happy with the state of affairs. They are not happy with whatever is going on. They are not happy, common teachers, with the salary and all that stuff. What will we attribute as the major factors contributing to a sad nation?
There are a range of issues, and I believe in as much as the current regime might be visionary, might be meaning well for the country, nothing seems to be working. And that's the issue. Come to matters education, we are comrades. The NFM,
We know better.
hey, it's not working at all. They are saying that we go back to the old system. That one was much better. Talk about health, people don't understand whether it's she or whatever. Like people hawaelewi, ukielezea mzazi ajue ni ni she, ni whatever. So that is health. Come to the issue, in as much as the cost of living, you would say that commodities, the prices of commodities might have reduced. It's not like when this government took over, but then you find that there is the burden on the tax, the pay slip of a person. So the pay slip has been overburdened, and so you have a range of taxes, and so at the end of the day, in as much as you are paid well, then they take at least they are about 50% of your money inaenda kwa tax. Then people will complain.
Your pay well imepotea, you just been paid.
And you are expected to pay for your kid. You are expected to ensure that insurance cover wow. Sometimes even if the new health coverage system contribute, you are contributing from your salary, but sometimes it doesn't seem to be working, so people will still spend money on health on an issue that they should not be spending money on. And I think it would be progressive if the government ensured that in as much as they tax more, let them reduce the burden to the citizens. Make education free. Make sure that healthcare is free, like people can access healthcare. When you reduce the burden of healthcare and you reduce the burden on education, you make it easy for Kenyans. And I think kuweka pesa mfukoni kwa Kenya, it comes from, I would really look at the issue of Moi Kibaki making education free. He aliweka pesa kwa mfuko ya watu through this. Once ume make education free, the money that the parent alikuwa anatumia kwa education si imerudi kwa nini yake, you spare that, so imerudi kwa mfuko yake. So hiyo ndo unaweka pesa kwa mfuko ya Mkenya, but it's not here dabrakadabra ya guesswork kenye the current regime inajaribu.
I think that brings it to an end at the Exchange podcast. We want to thank you so much for keeping it tuned. Remember to like, share, subscribe on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more updates. We've had a very interactive and informative session with one and only KK, representative from the Kenyatta University School of Law. I am your host, KIMATHI Winner, and until next time, kwaheri. Keep it tuned. Thank you so much.